Through all that we're going to get through tonight, we're going to have to get the ball rolling. Did anybody happen to read Isaiah 24 through 29 and have anything of note that they saw or anything that stood out to them? Anyone? I know it's early in the class to be asking questions like that. I'm going to put Mike's just sort of in the middle here, just be passed around. Anyone notice anything? If not, it's okay. I won't beat you tonight. I'll wait till tomorrow night. Okay. All right, so that's actually an extremely good observation. There seems to be a total destruction of the earth and all that's in it, right? And we're going to label that tonight as there seems to be an uncreation going on. There's a lot of images of reversing creation. So there's almost like we're going back before creation, okay? Anyone else notice anything else? That's a good observation, by the way. And we're only probably going to get to, if we get through all of chapter 24 tonight, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. If we get into chapter 25, we've accomplished something tonight. Okay, so Isaiah 24, as was pointed out, it's a destruction, yes, on the whole earth, but there's really this returning back. And uncreation and destruction, what are the differences between destruction and uncreation? If you were to try, right, without splitting hairs, to define the difference between a destruction of something and an uncreation of something, how would you describe that?
An uncreation sounds to me like it's something that never existed ever.
Okay.
You're
Okay, so destroying means all you're doing is crumbling something, right? You're taking it apart. The uncreation means you're undoing its very existence almost, right? You're undoing as if the influence of it or the thing did not have any power or influence over whatever it may be. I like that. Anyone else? Okay, so what it points to is that there was a creation, which gets back to purpose, right? Purpose, intent. Why was something created to begin with? And that's really the contrast that we're going to be looking at as we look at Genesis. We'll be in Genesis a little bit. Isaiah 24 and 25 is God trying to get back to an original intent, an original purpose, to remove the influence and destruction, the influence of what the world, and we're going to call it in verse 10, it's going to be called, your version may say empty city, desolate city, but the word is tohu, which in Genesis 1:2, tohu avohu, the world was empty and void, which actually in almost every other place means chaos. It's chaotic. So it's an interesting concept in Genesis 1, and this is something the Hebrews, especially your Second Temple Jews and the Messianic Jews that come afterwards, they don't see Genesis 1:2 as, when I say nothing, they would not describe nothing in the same way that we would describe nothing. For us, nothing means non-existence. For them, nothing means unknown, which unknown means chaos. That's why the deep, a lot of times the deep waters or the things that are in the deep or in the pit, you can't see what's down there. So what is that? That's chaos. That's unorder, right? And so in Genesis 1, it's poetic that God takes unorder, chaos, formless and void, and what does he do with it in Genesis 1? What does he bring about? Order. And all of Genesis 1 and 2 is all about ordering the earth, creating everything after its kind, having days, right? 1, 2, 3 correlate with 4, 5, 6. And in 7, God saw that all was good. Okay? And so a part of what we're going to be doing tonight is looking at what is Isaiah picturing. He's not just picturing a destruction where God takes from the ruined city and tries to rebuild something else with what's already here, what he's about to do is he's about to act as if the thing never existed. Now, that kind of brings us into our discussion of heaven a little bit, because a lot of this has a lot of eschatological terminology. And eschatology means the study of the end of things, end of time, right? So there's a lot of terms and describe as if the world's coming, right? As Stella pointed out, the world's coming to an end, which is an eschatology, the study of end times or the end of something. It doesn't always have to be the end of times. It could be the end of a dispensation, could be the end of a people, could be the end of the way of life, okay? So, and a lot of times, God will use these cosmic terms to talk about maybe a singular event or a singular thing. All right, so let's just jump right in, okay? We're going to read all of chapter 24, and I want someone to read Isaiah 24, 1 through 5. We're going to kind of start here. Isaiah 24, 1 through 5. And I want you to have creation in mind. I want you to have Genesis in mind, the big pictures of Genesis, a lot of the major emphasis of Genesis going on when you're reading the first 5 verses, really when we're reading the whole chapter. But who wants to read? All right. So wait. Let's get you your mic. Thank you. Go ahead.
Behold, the Lord will empty the earth and make it desolate, and he will twist its surface and scatter its inhabitants. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the slave, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the creditor, so with the creditor, so with the debtor. The earth shall be utterly empty and utterly plundered, for the Lord has spoken this word. The earth mourns and withers, the world languishes and withers, the highest people of the earth languish. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant.
All right. Go ahead and read verse 6 as well, just to kind of throw
Therefore a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for their guilt. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men are left.
Okay. First thoughts. When reading that.
Everybody's equal.
So one, this punishment has, there is no prejudice, right? And not only is there no prejudice, it seems as if because the destruction is going both to the high and to the low, means sin has corrupted what part of society? All of it. Which, remember, so far, why have the nations been punished? What is one of the major things that we've been talking about of once this begins to happen, that's when God says, okay, your time is ticking down. Okay, when you abuse the sojourner, the poor, injustice, right? When injustice becomes, and by the way, justice is always meant for the poor, those who cannot help themselves, because as we've stated before, do the rich, outside of your major sins, is it ever really just with the rich, right? Because a lot of times it's penalty, fines, and fees, which was the same back then. What's a penalty, fine, or fee to a rich man? It's an inconvenience, isn't it? Right? Someone who has a lot of money, all right, you're going to pay a $200 parking ticket. All right, here you go. To a poor man, $200 parking ticket may be a whole week's worth of pay, right? And so a lot of times when God's speaking of justice, he's not just saying make everything equal in the way we would think of equal, but make it weighted so that the poor don't, every time something happens, they don't become consumed by debt, be consumed by the justice that's going on. He's not really worried about the rich, so to speak, when he's speaking about the word justice. Now, sometimes he'll use justice as in when someone murders or all those types of things, right? Things that he punished. But a lot of times he's speaking about don't allow a society to be built upon the punishment of the poor, where they are kind of the backbone and suffering all the consequences, while the rich can kind of, when we say get away with it, are they really getting away with it with a $200 ticket? No. But how is that harming them? Right? How is that stopping them from doing that? Those kinds of things, okay? So even when God's idea of justice with balance, this weight and balance thing, it's not, hey, let's make the punishment equal across the board. It's that those who have a lot are expected what? A lot. Those who have a little are expected a little. All right? So a person who has a lot in society, is their expectation greater than those of the poor? It is. In God's kingdom, in God's world, okay? So what we're seeing here is that even the poor, even the debtor, even the slave has become consumed by sin, rebellion, and the breaking of the everlasting covenants. What would you, if you were hearing that term, the everlasting covenant, what comes to mind? When you hear, now in the realm of Jews, think everlasting covenant. What are some things that could be coming to mind as you read that? You think of Abraham? Okay, so we got Genesis 15, right? Genesis 15, where God, puts Abraham asleep, walks through, makes a covenant with him, right? And what are the implications of that covenant? Yeah. Yeah, so there's an aspect of the covenant, right? First of all, covenants are two parties coming together for an agreement, right? And ultimately, especially a blood oath covenant, which is what they did, right? Cut animals in half and they would have walked among the trench. They would have built a trench, and the animal blood would have kind of filtered into this trench, and they walked through, their cloaks dirty, or their cloaks all bloody, and what that represented was that if you break this covenant, blood must be spilled. So there's the breaking of the everlasting covenant. Now, interestingly enough, God demanded that Abraham still uphold his end of the agreement, though, right? Even though the consequences, God is basically showing us that he is ultimately going to pay for, it did not allow Abraham to just do what? Live and behave however he wanted to behave. Okay, there were punishments that he would have to deal with, but ultimately the grand punishment was going to be on whom? God. And we're going to see that actually later in the chapter when this righteous one will come up from out of the city, right? And there'll be betrayal and all those types of things. So there's the breaking of the covenant. Now, this word empty that we're seeing so far is not the word empty of the chaotic empty, the without form, without void. Right now, it's just a stripping bare. God is going to strip it bare. He's going to strip it down to its bare bones. One stone won't be left upon another. And so the world has to first, before God can reform it, the world first has to see the consequences of their sin. Right? And for them to see it, God has to follow all the way through with this punishment. Okay? So they can see the weight and the ground. Because imagine if God came and rescued the day before they were able to see what is the cost of sin. Before the weight of sin was put on their shoulders. That's different, right? It wouldn't have had the same impact, the same effect. Okay? So, we've got this Genesis 15. What other covenant was made in the book of Genesis? Huh? So there's Noah. There's a covenant made with Noah that he will never, right, destroy the earth with a... What does that imply? What does it imply that God will never destroy the earth with a flood again? Just because he won't do it that way, implications are, it doesn't mean it can't be done. Right? We're just going to do it differently. And that'd be a really good thread to follow all the way through, but we're going to pause right there. What other covenants are made in Genesis? There's the seed promise, which is ultimately a covenant that God is making with the people of man, that through your sin, what happened to the earth because of sin? There was a flood, but in Genesis 3. What happened to the earth itself in Genesis 3? It was cursed. The ground was cursed. What does verse 6 say of Isaiah 24 again? Therefore, a curse devours the earth, right? Now, once again, this idea of when man sins, it also impacts God's creation. We got to keep that in mind. When man sins, it also impacts God's creation. And that's why it's so important when you go to like Romans chapter 8, right? Romans chapter 8. Turn with me real quick there. And I want you to see what Paul is looking forward to, okay? What Paul's looking forward to. And so starting in verse 18, it says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is be to revealed. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God." And keep that phrase in your mind through Isaiah 24 once we get all the way to the end, okay? But they wait eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in, what does that word say? In hope. That the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only creation, but we ourselves, we have this first fruits. Now, we can get into the weeds on that real easy, and what is all that it's talking about. But specifically for our point in Isaiah 24, what God is telling us is, one, God's creation is more than just a vessel to house us. It within itself has some kind of value and glory that God has given it that God also wants to restore. Right? When God created all of creation, we may be what we'd call the apex of creation, but do you think God made all of the creation, all of the bugs, all the insects, all the birds, all the land animals, some sea creatures we will never discover. You know that? What's the point of them? All right? Besides ecosystems on ecosystems on ecosystems that we may not fully understand. But God is a creative being. Sometimes we make all of creation about who? And the Bible continually teaches us that creation is all about whom? It's all about the glory of God. Okay? And when we sinned, we put God's good creation under a curse. And as we continue to sin, what do we continue to do to God's creation? Now, God's creation is symbolic of the goodness and the wisdom and the glory of God. Okay? We hurt it. We harm it. That's why when we talk about sin, we don't want to just talk about, well, who's it hurting? Right? We're always wanting to know, well, who is it hurting? Just because I'm doing it, it's hurting nobody. Have you ever heard that before? When someone's doing something and it's just self-imposed, maybe it's self-inflicted. Well, who's it hurting? Well, it's hurting the glory of God. One, because you are a part of the creation of God. You are made in His image. And when God created earth, He created it to be as good, just as good as you. And your sin not only put Jesus on the cross, it also put a curse on God's goodness. Okay? And so what Isaiah is seeing is there's coming a time when this curse has been built up so much. Who causes the destruction of the earth? Man or God? Man. We build up this curse. We build up it so much that the curse itself is the thing that unravels creation. Now, is God a part of that? Absolutely, right? God laid the curse down, didn't He? He put the curse there, and He uses the curse, okay? But ultimately, we can't go, God, why did you cause the flood? God didn't cause the flood. God, why did you destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? God did not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. The curse built up. Does that make sense? So you seeing that image? And by the way, this image is played over and over and over again. Why was Israel not allowed into the land, the promised land? Because the sins of the Amorites were not yet full. The curse had not built up to a point where God could justly punish and destroy and unravel. All right. Someone read verse 7. Well, read 7 through 11. Read 7 through 11.
7 through 11. The new wine mourns, the vine languishes, all the merry-hearted do sigh. The mirth of the tabrets cease, the noise of them that rejoice ends, the joy of the harp ceases. They shall not drink wine with a song, strong drink shall be bitter to them that drink it. The city of confusion is broken down, every house is shut up, that no man may come in. There is a crying for wine in the streets, all the joy is darkened, the mirth of the land is gone.
Okay, first impressions there. First impressions of 7 through 11. Huh? No joy. Okay? Now, are things still happening that normally would create joy? Are they not still trying to sing and dance and shout and use their instruments? These things that would normally create joy, what's happening? What does that symbolize to you? Things that normally would bring joy and pleasure, no longer to be found. Well, I mean, think about depression. I mean, think about people, when you're dealing with depression, let's say you're a parent. There's a lot of parents who miss out on their kids' childhood because they've lived a life of depression. Things that would normally bring them joy and seeing their kid walk or seeing their kid talk or doesn't, right? So depression affects a lot of that. So, yeah, good point. And think about that. Depression is a symptom of things that would normally bring us joy. They just don't. What else can you think of? Huh? Silence? Yeah, so quietness. Okay, but what about this idea of when you dance and you sing, and there's no rejoicing to be found in it? What is the symbolism when it comes to, let's say, sin, as we've been discussing in rebellion? Is sin fun at times? Is rebellion fun? I mean, why would people rebel against God if it didn't bring them some kind of joy and pleasure? And when sin, guess what happens, especially when there's drink involved, as we've been, he talks about the drinking of wine, and what happens? We're glad. Well, what happens eventually? That same sin becomes less and less what? Especially when it begins to harm. But what God is telling us is, there's going to come a day, and that's what we're going to see, there's going to come a day when everyone's going to kind of go, where's the joy? Where's the joy in sin? Where's the joy in rebellion? Where's the joy? Because especially in the book of Isaiah, what's coming? What's coming? You think it's going to be fun when they see an army coming over the hilltop to surround the city? Do you think that they're going to be throwing dances and parties and worshiping idols and committing adultery and committing all sorts of, revelry in the streets? You think that's going to be something? Let's go out and do that. You think that's what they're going to be doing?
So this sounds like the Diddy effect?
The what?
The Diddy effect?
I don't know what that means.
It's a coin I just termed.
Okay, Diddy.
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words,
I didn't
everybody
go there.
wanted to be included in Diddy's parties. It was everybody who was famous. They all wanted to go. They had a huge reputation. Everybody wanted to fly on Epstein's jet. Everybody wanted to go to the island. But now we see what the debauchery and what took place, and how awful and how evil it was. But when it was going on, everybody who was somebody wanted to be included.
Yeah, and oftentimes when those sins become to be exposed, right, when you're doing sin with everybody who's also partaking in it, doesn't it look cool? Isn't it? Right? In our little group, this sin is great. But the moment someone finds out about what you did and go, why would you do that? What in the world were you thinking? I still remember one time, unfortunately, I started sharing a couple stories with Ashley's grandmother. And if you know Ashley's side of the family, I mean, you've met Ashley, take her grandmother on steroids of like the prim, proper, of never, I don't think she's ever committed sin, you know, I'm saying that lightly. But like the most pure-hearted person I've ever met. And she just, why would you do that? I was like, I don't know, I was 15. She goes, I was 15, I didn't do that. And I just felt so bad. Like, the more I talk, I was like, I'm just going to go over here and hide in the corner. Other places I tell that story, what? That's awesome, man. That's you did what? You know, so it depends on who you're telling it to. What happens when God comes and says, hey, explain yourself to me? Is it going to sound cool and fun? Are you going to be able to justify? You may be able to justify sin to me and what your Friday nights look like to me. But when God says, hey, what were you doing? What's that you're doing? That's what sin's going to feel like. Yeah, hey, go play that song one more time for me. That song you just were singing, that song you were just listening to, go play that in my presence. This is sort of what Isaiah is getting at, right? When there is no overbearing God who's witnessing all your actions, which, once again, it's not that God's not witnessing it, it's that they have what? They have ignored it. They don't think he's watching, or they don't think he's cared because they give the sacrifices, right? Because they do the incense, because they keep the feast, and that's going to be a big thing later in Isaiah. Hey, we give all the... What? I don't want any of it from you, right? And so when God's there, he exposes. Now, what is it about wine in Scripture? Have you ever noticed a theme when it comes to wine in Scripture, especially with God, especially in the prophets? A lack of wine is always a representation of what? God has removed blessing. And the abundance of wine, the vineyard, the vine, right, which represents first fruits, which represents flourishing, which represents that they have the things that they need. I mean, let's go back to Isaiah chapter 5 real quick. And this is something we skipped over because I knew we were going to kind of be hitting it here. But I'm just going to read the first 7 verses. Now, this is about Israel, but watch this. It says, verse 1, let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. And it's always about this idea of a vineyard. And God sees himself as his creation, his people are like a vineyard, right? That he's growing, that he's pruning, he's plucking, he's making into something usable, okay? My beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hill. He dug it, cleared some of the stones, planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it, and he hewed out of a wine vat in it. And he looked for it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem, men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there for me to do to my vineyard that I have not done? When I looked for it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? So here's the thing. God says, I've planted you. I put a watchtower in the middle, and I did all that I could do. Look what I've done for the vineyard. And I wanted it to produce a certain type of grapes, and it's producing wild grapes, which wild grapes, by the way, are sour, unusable, ones that God had not, that's not the type of grapes that God had planted. They've become something else. And God said, accuse me of not being the vine dresser that I should have been. So if I've been the vine dresser that I should have been, why are these grapes wild? If it's not the vine dresser, it's the vines. It's the grapes. It's you guys, right? And so what he points to is that he's going to destroy this vineyard. He's going to destroy the vines. He's going to destroy the wine. Now, when one of the major prophecies of the Messianic kingdom, like in Zechariah and Micah and Ezekiel, one of the first signs was going to be this sign of new wine, fresh wine, abundant wine. Does anyone know why John, when he was organizing his 7 signs that he was performing, what is number 1? The wedding feast, where he does what? He turns water into wine. This was a symbol of the presence of God's blessings, okay, which was a symbol of the Messianic kingdom. And so here he's saying, no more, look at verse 9, no more do they drink wine with singing, strong drink is bitter. The wasted city, this is where we get tohu, this is the chaotic city, the formless city, the formless and void city is broken down, every house is shut up so that no one can enter. There is an outcry in the streets for a lack of wine. And that's a symbol of the lack of God blessing them. Okay? So the first thing this city is going to realize, all God has to do for a city to realize that to watch a city or a nation to begin to fall is just go, I'm going to remove my protection from you. I'm going to remove my presence from you. I'm going to remove any and all things that I would have blessed you with. I'm going to remove it all. And immediately the cities will start to do what? They'll start to fall apart themselves. Now, what defines a city? If you were going to say, if you were like, let's say a little kid was trying to figure out what's the difference between country and city or urban, like what would you say a city is? What would define a city? Has a seat of government, which brings about order, right? It's ordered. In most cities, when they're finally being built, someone designed it to look a certain way, to be a certain... Now, some cities, I don't think anybody designed it. I think they just started throwing buildings up and streets down until they figured out, oh, we're big enough to be a city now. But normally, cities are meant to be organized and structured. And so to have a chaotic city is a paradox. A city with no organization. A city with no order, right? That is chaos. If you've ever seen like any apocalyptic movies, they're in the cities and there's nothing what in these cities? There's no order. People are just running around like what? They're stealing things, they're taking things, right? They're trying to survive, but it's broken down. Can that, just because there's buildings and streets and maybe some people, is that what defines what a city is? It's an ordered group of people, okay? So what God is doing is he's saying there's going to be a paradox. There's going to be people who come together, but it's going to, every time they do something, it's going to bring nothing but chaos. Have you ever known of a group of people, every time they get together, whatever they touch just gets worse and not better? Right? They put their hands on it, and it's just, that's going downhill. Right? That's the image that we're looking at. It's not that God has come in and destroyed the city. God says, I'm removing the wine. I'm removing the joy. I'm removing my presence. And immediately the people will know something's up. Something's not right. I'm going to kind of bring some modern day application to that. There's been a lot of studies, and we've talked about this before. The newest generation coming up, around the ages of like 12 to 17, they're looking at a lot of the things that are going on around people that are my age. And they're kind of looking at the news, they're looking at these Instagram influencers, they're looking at these YouTubers, they're going, that's crazy. It's what's happening. They are fleeing away from all of the immoral and it's something they don't want to be a part of. And they're fleeing. It's not 100%, right? You're still going to find it, especially where do you find that the most? In your big, don't start saying blue or red, just cities. Normally, in your cities, what happens to sin? It's where it grows. It's where it festers, right? You get out into kind of more of your country-ish kind of stuff. Why does it not grow as much there? One, the influence. Are you able to influence your kids with less people around them or more people around them? Right? So, all right. I think I've beat that horse to death. But did someone say something?
Can I ask a crazy question?
Crazy question.
You know mine.
Ready for a crazy
How
answer?
do you know that it's symbolic, one, and not literal? How do you know that it's symbolic? Because to me, when I read it, it's literal. Because he's already talking about being drunk. So how do you know that's symbolic and not literal?
Well, first you got to realize what kind of literature you're reading. Okay? When you are reading the prophets, they will talk about things in symbols and signs, and they will use, kind of like when God says, I'm going to come and I'm going to bring destruction on Jerusalem, and I'm going to empty them with fire. They're going to be consumed with fire. And then 3 chapters later, he goes, I'm sending Babylon there. They're going to destroy them. So he didn't really burn it with fire. So fire becomes a symbol of what? Destruction. Sometimes, oftentimes, it's purification through destruction. That's what it becomes. And so you have to follow a lot of these symbols and signs throughout the book. Because if everything were literal, let's throw this out there. If everything were literal, then if you go to read chapters like 13 and 24, then God is doing 2 different things to the world completely. Because one time he's talking about how he's going to burn it all. Next time he's going to talk about how he's just going to make it a wasteland or desolate. The next he'll talk about how he's going to rain down the stars from heaven. Well, which one is it? Right? Is he literally going to rain down stars from heaven? Or is he going to catch it on fire? Or is it going to be a wasteland? Or are those speaking of something else? Okay? So a lot of the book of Isaiah, you got to remember, is talking about prophetic language, is giving them images. Because, and this is why, the Hebrews, a lot of times, the Hebrew language itself is word pictures. A lot of the words are not, like when we say the word run, we start thinking of the literal definition, don't we? Something that's running or something that's, that's word picture. When you say run, I think of somebody going out for a run. You start automatically picturing something, right? And so with the vine, now one of the reasons why with the wine and vine, on the first fruits, what was the first thing they were supposed to offer up to God? From the vineyard. They were allowed to exchange the old wine and for new wine, and it was a celebration. They would all drink of the new wine, and we're not going to get into that discussion right now, but they would drink of the new wine, okay? And it was the first night of the feast of first fruits. And what it showed was that we've given everything over to God, and God is going to do what? Now, because we've given everything to God, he's going to bless us. So, because normally when you think about, if you're going to take your first of the harvest, what do you want to do with the first of your harvest if you're not a religious person? Keep it, right? Because you've probably been living off rations, right? Because a lot of times you have a harvest season for maybe 2 months. And you've got a harvest enough to last you all year. By the time that new harvest is coming, are you starting to become sparse and scarce with your food? Yeah. So you giving that first is a show to God that I trust that God is going to bring more to come. And the first day of that was always filled with turning in the old wine. You could, if you still had old wine from last harvest, you could turn it in and you would exchange it for the new wine that was brought from the vineyards, and you were able to drink of it. And so this became a symbol of God's presence and blessing. This is one of the reasons why, and I'm going to say this with as much grace as I can. When people say, just pick up your Bible and read it and understand it, I call that out every time. I call it out every time. How many people have picked up their Bible? Now, there may be 1 in a million people who can pick it up, read it from start to finish. Right? One, how long does it take you to read from Genesis to Revelation? If you're a dedicated reader and you have a plan, you're in a year. How many of you have done a reading plan every year or read through the Bible more than multiple times? How many of you struggle with understanding the Bible? Why do we have these classes? Why didn't I just tell you, hey, go read Isaiah 24? This is supposed to be a group community think tank. It's why I don't want to be the only one up here leading us. I want you guys to read it, and I try to start the class with, what'd you guys get out of it? Because a lot of times, you guys see things, depression, I never would have thought about that. That's something I wrote down over here because I want to explore that. And what I benefit from are things like this, all right? And this guy, one of the reasons why I love him is he takes from a vast variety of different people who have spent their entire lives just studying Isaiah. If you ask these people about Ezekiel, they're going to go, what? Right? I mean, they'll know something. Or if you ask them about Deuteronomy, they're not going to be as expert as they are here. So we come together and we study these things together. So that's a side note. All right, I didn't get through Isaiah 24, so I did not accomplish my goal. But now with this, please read Isaiah 24 and 25 at least 2 times through by next week. Take everything that we talked about tonight and try to look for it. And once you read it, hopefully it'll start making more sense. Levi?